So much for your patience. I greatly appreciate it.
No problem.
As Dr. Martinez Bianchi said, I am Jean Fisher Brinkley. I am very, very happy to have this opportunity to speak with you and excited to talk with you all about the North Carolina Medical Board. So, brief overview of the talk. We're just going to talk about the mission and the responsibilities of the North Carolina Medical Board. Then I will talk a little bit about our efforts to be accessible to Spanish speakers and people who speak any other language other than English, including people who are deaf or hard of hearing. And then finally, I'll just briefly review some of the services that we provide to the public. Okay, be nice if I could get the slides to advance. Okay, so some of you may be familiar, others may not, but the North Carolina Medical Board is a state agency that is not part of state government, which means that the state delegates to the North Carolina Medical Board the responsibility of licensing physicians and physician assistants. There are also a couple of smaller health professions, licensed perfusionists, anesthesiology assistants that are also licensed by the medical board, but the largest groups are physicians and physician assistants. Our job under state law is to enforce laws governing the practice of medicine. This agency is fully self-funded. We don't receive any money through the state budget. Instead, the budget comes from fees that are associated either with license applications or with annual renewals from our licensees who are required to renew their licenses each year. We have more than 50 professional staff, and our headquarters are here in Raleigh. And the actual members of our board, there are 13 of those, and they are a diverse group from across the state. I'm going to show you a picture in just a moment. If I can get it to click forward. There we go. So this is the most recent photograph of our board. You can see there are 13 members. When I say they're diverse, I mean that really by the broadest definition of the word. They're diverse in that they represent all different medical specialties. They're diverse by gender, they're diverse from where they are in the state. They are really from Murphy to Manteo, they represent all of the different regions of our state. We, have good representation, racially diverse. We do only currently have one Spanish speaking member. It's the gentleman sort of in the rose or mauve colored jacket. That is Miguel Pinheiro. He's a native of Puerto Rico, and he has actually been he's a physician assistant. He's been a great advocate for the Hispanic community across North Carolina. We already had been, and I'll talk more about this in a moment, translating our brochures and various resources into Spanish, but he has been a really great advocate. By any time we create something new, he wants to make sure that we are thinking about people who don't speak English, and in particular people who speak Spanish. And honestly, he has largely, been the driving force for us to reach out to organizations that serve the Hispanic community across North Carolina. I think in the past we've been a little bit shy because we don't have, the language, working for us. We speak, the staff and communications speak English, and I think we've been a little bit afraid to reach out organizations that serve Spanish speakers. And he has encouraged us to sort of get past that and at least, extend the hand and open the conversation. So thank you again for the opportunity. So the medical board's mission, we exist. The reason that we exist is for the benefit and the protection of the people of North Carolina. That's actually the statutory mandate. So how do we do that? How do we benefit, regulate medicine and surgery for the benefit and protection?
Hello.
Hello.
I'm so sorry to interrupt.
I see that there's a question in the chat and it's a really good one. I
Oh,
didn't know
okay.
if you wanted to like check
Certainly.
them out.
I
And
did not see the chat.
Luisa, I will manage the chat at the end, Jean. We will
okay.
go through all the questions.
Right.
My apologies. My apologies.
Oh, not a problem. I would be delighted to take questions. Let me just move on. Okay, so how do we fulfill the mission? The first part is licensing. So we license, as I said, physicians, PAs, and certain others. That is a way of protecting the public by making sure that only people who have the knowledge and the skill to practice medicine safely get a license in the first place. Now that process is not perfect. We can't guarantee that just because someone meets the qualifications for licensure that they're going to have a spotless career in North Carolina, but it is sort of the first line of defense, if you will, is that we try only to license those that we really believe can practice safely. The second piece sort of dovetails nicely with that. It's the regulation piece. And that is where the board has a responsibility for investigating and then holding accountable professionals who don't practice safely. Sometimes that's by remediating them. So if there are areas of deficiency identified with somebody's medical practice, the board has the opportunity to ensure that they address those deficiencies so that they can practice safely. Or in some instances, if there's misconduct, then the board is responsible for disciplining the physician or the PA. And then thirdly, the board, especially in recent years, engages in a lot of policy development. In some sense, that has to do with providing guidance about the interpreting laws related to the practice of medicine, and then making sure that our licensees understand what it is that they need to do to be in compliance. And I do think something really important about the medical board is that the medical board is sort of known for being the agency that can discipline doctors and PAs. But really, the board comes from a perspective of belief that the vast majority of the medical professionals we license are good, competent professionals who, given good information, will make good choices and do the right thing. So the board certainly does not approach this thinking that medical professionals are up to do no good. In fact, it's quite the opposite. We think that most medical professionals want to do the art and the craft that they train for and take care of their patients. We see ourselves as having a role in sort of providing information and guidance to help them do just that. And when necessary, remediating and disciplining. As far as serving non-English speakers, I do think, it's always challenging. I'm not going to lie. It's always a little bit of a shuffle and a struggle, when somebody who doesn't speak English or who is not hearing is trying to interact with us. That said, we take very seriously the board's responsibility to serve all North Carolina residents. And so we do have several things in place to try to serve non-English speaking or people with limited English proficiency. First thing is just sort of standard in a lot of websites, but still I like to point it out. We do have Google Translate installed on our website. It's in the bottom right corner of our website, and I'll show you a screen in just a moment. Anything that is text can be translated into Spanish or the language of your choice. We actually do have an area on our website that shows images. We have an image that is just a message in Spanish that says, do you speak Spanish? You can translate this website. So we sort of point them to the right place to do that. Some people know to look for it, but if they don't, we're trying to sort of catch their attention and say, if you prefer to be reading this website in Spanish, go to the bottom of the webpage. The other thing that we have is that we contract with an interpretation service. So anyone who calls who is not comfortable speaking in English can request an interpreter. And we can have somebody on the phone with them, conference them in within minutes. That is a HIPAA compliant service. So if they are talking about sensitive medical matters, that is covered, they don't have to worry about that. And then if people prefer to file their complaint in their native language, we do have a Spanish language version of our complaint form available. People can fill out their complaint form in Spanish. That would then need to be translated. Probably goes without saying, it takes a little bit longer when you are doing interpretation and translation, just to allow for the information and correspondence to be translated. However, it is really important, to have that available so that people can access resources from the North Carolina Medical Board, regardless of their proficiency in English. And then again, this is just an image of the homepage of our website translated into Spanish. In this image, pretty much everything did translate. If you use Google Translate, you may know that images, anything that is an image as opposed to text, does not translate. So if you look up at that top left corner, you can see that our logo, North Carolina Medical Board, that did not translate into Spanish because it's a picture, it's an image. So that is a drawback of Google Translate, but in general, anything that is in text on our website, people can read, which is helpful for people who then can see, they can then call us and then talk. So the first service that I wanted to talk with you about, there's really two main things that the medical board provides that are of interest to the public. The first is our complaint process. So I mentioned before that, we investigate misconduct and we either remediate or discipline where warranted. This is probably one of the most used resources. Last year, or in a typical year, we get about 2,000 complaints from patients and members of the public. And basically, filing a complaint gives the board a chance, to hold the licensee accountable if their conduct or the medical care they've provided is below accepted standards. That is what we do. And then filing a complaint is a way to, for a patient who has had a negative experience with a licensee of the board, it's a way for them to protect others from going through something similar. One thing that I like to emphasize, especially when I'm talking to community groups where there's lots of patients in the audience, is that it's really important for people to understand our role. I think a lot of times when people are having an issue with their doctor, I get calls from people, for example, who will say, I've been trying to get a refill of my medication. The doctor hasn't returned my call. It's been 5 days. I'm getting really nervous. I'm going to run out of medication. That's a real problem, certainly that it would be very distressing to a patient. It's not what the medical board does. We do not intervene in real time and solve somebody's problem. And a lot of members of the public don't really understand that. So when they contact the board, they want us to jump into action and intervene on their behalf, talk to their doctor, talk to their PA, and fix the problem. But unfortunately, that is not what we do. So what do we do? Over here. So this sort of continues, what we don't do. I promise I'll get to what we do. So, these are the kinds of things that people will ask about. They maybe they want a certain medication and the doctor won't prescribe it. They say, can't you contact my doctor and tell them that I really, really need this medication? No, we don't do that. Sometimes people have had a really negative experience. They want to pursue a lawsuit against a provider. We cannot assist with that. That's not our role. Similarly, if they want a financial settlement, or even if they just want an I'm sorry, they want an apology for a mistake that was made, that is not our role either. So I like to put that right out front, because it's, again, important, for people to understand that the medical board complaint process is not going to help them achieve any of those things. And if they go into the complaint process with those expectations, they're almost certainly going to be frustrated and disappointed and perhaps even angry at the outcome of their case. And they will feel like, well, gee, that was a waste of my time. So what do we do? These are the reasons that you do file a complaint. I think it's a helpful analogy is filing a complaint is like sounding an alarm bell. Something has gone wrong, with a doctor, with a PA, that's unacceptable. And you need to warn the medical board, yes, but also other patients, the public at large. So if you have had an experience and you believe that the medical care that you've received was negligent or below accepted standards, and you want that provider held accountable, hey, you did the wrong thing, that is a good reason to file a complaint, because yes, we can investigate that. We can look at the medical records. We can make a determination if in fact the care was negligent or below standard. And if it was, then the board can do various things to hold that provider accountable. Another good reason is that their conduct, the licensee's personal conduct, is unethical or unprofessional. We see this with sexual misconduct. So there's been sexual misconduct, or you might have a provider who is using alcohol or substances, or they are trying to get patients to lend them money or invest in their side business. Those are things that are not acceptable. Those are unethical things. If something like that had happened, that would be a good thing to report to the board, because the board could investigate that and put a stop to that. And then the other, key part is, there's nothing in the board's complaint process can really unring the bell. If something bad has happened to you or a loved one, we can't really fix that, but we can intervene and try to prevent whatever the bad thing was from happening in future, to someone else. So those are all the reasons, to file a complaint. And again, nothing is guaranteed. A complaint, we really do operate under the, innocent until proven guilty. The board has to investigate and really only has, the authority to act if it has evidence that there was in fact a violation. So it's all evidence-based. We follow the law. When the law supports it, the board does take action, corrective actions. The second major resource that we provide is really just information. And that is information about our licensees, doctors and physician assistants. We have the state's largest and most comprehensive online database of information about the physicians and PAs that we license, accessible to people through our website. You can look up any physician or PA. Best way is if you have their name, looking them up by their last name and first name. You can also look up by specialty, by county. And if you're trying to find a physician in a particular area of practice, for example, you can use it for that. And once you have pulled up an individual's page, you can see all kinds of useful information, like whether they in fact have an active North Carolina medical license. It's not lawful to practice without one. So if you were going to see a provider for the first time, you might want to look them up and make sure that it was lawful for them to be practicing. You can see information about their education and their training, if they're board certified. And then a lot of people are very interested in finding out if there's any adverse history. So have they had any regulatory actions in their past? In addition to just whether the medical board has taken an action, there's also information about whether they have a criminal conviction in their past, or whether perhaps they've ever had their hospital privileges suspended. There's also a law in North Carolina that makes certain malpractice payment information public, and that is posted on the page if it meets criteria for posting. So there's lots of good information available to people. It's free. It's available 24/7. And it's just a great resource for people to be more informed about their medical providers. This is another image of our homepage, and I've just got the red circle there. If you click on that button that says look up a doctor or PA, it takes you to a search window where you can put in the name, or you can search by county, or the other methods that I mentioned. And I believe with that, yeah, that is my last slide. Before we open it up to questions, I will just say, you know, in preparing to speak with your group, I have thought about like what are ways that we could work together. I know that your group, you know, addresses health disparities in North Carolina with the Hispanic community. And I think although, you know, we're not an advocacy organization, health disparities is not something that is directly part of our mission. It is something that I think that we can help with because, for example, one of the largest health disparities for, you know, any community that I'm going to just say Spanish speaking, you know, people who have limited English proficiency is really just accessibility of healthcare at all, because you can't find providers who speak Spanish or who speak your language, and not just who can speak it, but who can provide competent medical care in Spanish. And as you probably know, I mean, it is the legal right of any patient to have an interpreter provided to them in their language of choice at no charge. That is something I have my doubts about how compliant medical providers are with that law. But that is something, for example, that my department in particular, communications, we develop education for our licensees. So one of the things I have done working with the deaf and the hard of hearing is to make information available to our licensees about how you would request an interpreter for somebody who is deaf or hard of hearing, and how you can obtain Medicaid reimbursement for that. So in the context of language interpretation, I think, you know, I could certainly see us doing some sort of education on the topic of interpreters and making our licensees aware of the laws regarding that, and then giving some guidance on how to go about setting up interpretation. So with that, I would love to take any of your questions. I apologize again for all of the technical difficulties. I'm glad we were able to push through.